Hi everybody, welcome to Christian Homestead. I finally have my lighting situation fixed. Went to Walmart, bought some different types of lights now that I had a little bit of extra money, and I think it's working. So I'm going to be honest with you. This entire year, I felt somewhat disconnected from you because before moving to Missouri, I would do a lot more videos like this. I did a lot more live streams, a lot more monologues where I'm just talking into the camera, and that's been missing this whole year. And for me, I don't know about you, but for me, it's felt a little bit sterile. I made some attempts, but just I have a new studio. The lighting situation is different. And, you know, I was really excited when we moved here because there's a lot of potential. I like the wood background, but I just couldn't get the lighting right until now. So I'm going to start to do these type of videos more often and probably live streams as well. But in this video, I want to just share a quick, simple idea that I had about changes in the church. So let's go back to the beginning of President Nelson's presidency, and there was a flurry of changes. He hit the ground running, and the changes came fast and furious, and they were big. Um, there were paradigm shifts. I don't mean to be a broken record, but I was stunned when the church pulled away from the Boy Scouts program. I felt like I thought that that was just going to be a permanent fixture of the church all the way till the millennium or whatever. But no, it happened. I think it was back in 2018. Um, the retirement of home teaching and visiting teaching and everything just becoming ministering, and the high priest quorum and elders quorum meeting together, and lots of stuff like that. And I remember back then there was, I can't remember, I showed it on the channel one time, but there was like a message board, or maybe it was a blog, where somebody was talking about how he heard this key phrase used in different places, and the phrase was, "This is just a snowflake in a blizzard," with all the changes that are coming, and that turned out to be true. So here we are with President Oaks, and are we going to see something similar? And I kind of think that we will, and I'll explain why. So right off the bat, there have already been some pretty big shifts and changes. So, for example, in the last general conference, we were all expecting temples to be announced. I thought that 18 temples would be announced because that would bring the total to 400 between all the different phases of construction and announcement and everything. But to my surprise, and to most of your surprise, I think, they didn't announce any temples. President Oaks said that we needed to kind of slow down and work on the ones that had already been announced. And so that was a shocker. When's the next time going to be that we have a new temple announced? Is it going to be in general conference? Is it going to be between general conferences? Is that something that's going to change with President Oaks? I don't know, but that's one of the big changes. Another thing was this upcoming First Presidency Christmas devotional, how it's pre-recorded. And then there was one other thing, it slipped my mind. I should have written notes. There was one other thing that I was shocked about. Maybe it'll come back to me. But the one thing I would like to say, though, because this is a segue into the next point I want to make, I can't say for sure. I can't say for sure that these changes that we've already seen have anything to do with President Oaks. This may have been something that was already in the works. For all we know, if President Nelson had survived to this next general conference, the last one that we just had, maybe he would have done the same thing. And it makes me think about something that Elder Bednar said. This was like I can't remember what they called it, like a seminar, like a leadership training type thing for CES. And I've shared this on the channel before. But essentially what Elder Bednar said in that training was, everybody gave credit to For example, President Hinckley. Yeah, he used the example of President Hinckley. Everyone gave credit to President Hinckley for the idea of small temples, but he's not the one that came up with the idea of small temples. That was actually instituted under President Kimball. And what people are misunderstanding is that what President Hinckley did is he just made them smaller and he made more of them. But he talked about the fact, and he gave, I think, kind of a timeline of events, how when you have big things happen in the church, there's a process. It doesn't just happen all at once. There's a difference between when the revelation is received and when it's implemented. Okay. The Lord tends to do things in practical ways, in an orderly way, in orderly fashion, and he allows us to do problem solving and figure out how to implement certain commandments, inspiration, revelation that we've been given, both on the personal level and at the church level. But he went through this timeline showing that it was a process getting from when those first revelations were received. They actually had to do with the temple endowment and the presentation. And one of the first steps leading to small temples was going from having the live performances with actors to having it recorded, because there was this issue with like doing it in different languages, and they realized, oh, well, we could do it with recordings, and that way it's perfect every time, and we have it in all the different languages by someone who knows the language, that kind of thing. So he went on to say, and he sarcastically said, everyone always says, nothing happened during President Monson, and oh yeah, it's not like he received any revelation. But then he clarified and is like, of course he received revelation, and of course he was busy doing things, and the things that were coming in, the revelation and inspiration that was coming in during President Monson, you're not really seeing it until now with President Nelson. Okay, so there's a delay, there's a process. A lot of these things are like multi-phased. It comes in little by little, leads up to something bigger. And so if that's the case, all the things that we saw with President Nelson, especially at the beginning of his presidency, if all of those things were already in the works with President Monson, and maybe even going back to President Hinckley, maybe going back to President Hunter and beyond, who knows? Because Elder Benar said that some things take decades to actually come to fruition. So that being the case, there's not really a way for you and for me to determine when a certain change was decided, unless it's like, unless it's reported on and the church tells, like Church News or Newsroom, when they started thinking about it. There's not a way for us to really know. And so that begs the question, how much of what President Nelson did, like with these big changes, how much of it was already in the works, and how much of it came, like how much of the revelation came in for certain things during his presidency. But the one thing I'd like to point out is that we all know that President Nelson's presidency was very focused on the second coming. It was focused on missionary work, the Lord's Youth Battalion, and doing things in a higher, holier way. But it was very focused on the second coming. And so knowing that there's a delay in when certain revelations are implemented, what are we waiting to see at this point? Because if all that is what came in from President Monson and President Hinckley, like we started to see it with President Nelson, and who knows, there could actually be more. But if that's what we've seen, well, having a presidency like President Nelson's, there's probably a lot that came through the pipeline and is in the works. And so with President Oaks, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of things that were being thought about initially in President Nelson's presidency. There is one anecdote that I can point to. I have it on my spreadsheets. Sister Nelson talked about, I think this was like it was probably like a Church News podcast, the podcast that they do. but she was talking about what it's like being the wife of the prophet, and how she's seen him receive revelation. And there was one day that he came home from the office and he was really excited about something. And she's like, "Well, what are you excited about?" And he's like, "We made a big decision today. And, you know, when it becomes public, it's going to be just so wonderful and incredible." And she's like, "Well, what is it?" And well, she knew that he couldn't tell her. Um, but she was like, "So when am I going to find out?" And he said, "Oh, in about 50 years." So there's an example right there. So we at least know that there's one thing that's in the pipeline that we won't see until 50 years from now, or I guess at this point maybe 45 to 40 years, something like that. Um, and so I still can't remember that other thing that happened. So we got the Christmas devotional, the pre-recorded Christmas devotional. We have the halt in announcing temples. Oh yeah, and then the discontinuation of the Saturday evening sessions of General Conference. That's really big. I grew up with the Saturday evening session, and I did my research. I put together that spreadsheet that's a timeline of all the different types of General Conference sessions that we've had, mostly focused on the Saturday evening session. And it goes back at least to 1971. There's always been a Saturday evening session. So I don't know if you saw that video where I talked about that when that news broke, but they had tried to do that in 2021. I think it was going to start with the October 2021 General Conference, but for some reason they didn't cancel it. They just made it a joint session instead of canceling it altogether. Unless there's something about that story that I'm misunderstanding. If like what they were actually saying is, "Oh, no more priesthood session or women's session," like we're canceling that. But I don't think so. What I read, it seemed pretty clear that they were talking about canceling the Saturday evening session altogether. But anyway, um it makes me wonder, are we going to see, so we've already seen these two things between conference sessions, the announcement of a pre-recorded Christmas devotional, and then the cancellation of Saturday evening sessions. So we didn't have to wait for the next general conference for that, and none of that was announced in the last conference. So anything could happen, and that's exciting, and that's why I love doing this channel, is because I can spend all my time just focusing on these things, waiting for things to happen, and then reporting it, analyzing it, comparing it to the past, and thinking about the implications. But this is a very exciting time to be a member of the church. If you're new to the church, it's never been like this. I would say, in my lifetime, President Hinckley's time is probably the only other time that really compares as far as like big exciting things. Um, with him, it was well, there was a lot of stuff with him. It was mostly all the temple announcements. That was shocking. But then on top of that, it was under his presidency that the conference center was announced, and that portion of Main Street that is now the Main Street Plaza that connects Temple Square to the church office building block. That happened under him. There were a lot of things, and during President Monson's time, there were interesting things as well. I always bring up 2012 when we had the Mormon moment. There was a lot of stuff with that, the lowering of the mission age, but President Nelson's presidency has been unlike any other, for sure. Except for like the early days of the church when Joseph Smith was here, that there were a lot of new things that were introduced in those years. But yeah, you know what? That's kind of interesting because Elder Stevenson, he gave that talk. I can't remember how long ago now. A couple general conferences ago. I think in 2024. Yeah, it was 2024, and I think it was October because he said like from 2024 to 2034, it's going to be a decade never to be forgotten, and something the likes of which we haven't seen since the first decade of the church from 1820 to 1830. that there's going to be a lot of exciting things to look forward to. And he was focusing on different events that's going to bring a lot of exposure to the church and opportunities for us to bring our friends to, open houses for temples, um, the bicentennial of the church, the Olympics in Salt Lake, and the Salt Lake Temple open house. That's going to be a really big event. A lot of people are going to go through the temple to see that. So, in that sense, as far as like exposure to a worldwide audience, that's going to be exciting. But I feel like there's probably going to be a lot more changes. The church is getting bigger. And a lot of these changes I think are happening because the church is getting bigger. And then beyond that, because we're getting closer and closer to the second coming, there's going to be a transition period. And it's unclear, what President Oaks currently knows about the timing. President Nelson, in his last talk, he said that we don't know the day or the hour. I still feel like they could know like just a general range, maybe a certain window of time, X number of years, or before 2033 or something like that, before 2034. I still wouldn't be surprised if they did know something like that. But um the church, you would think that they would be thinking about the transition from the pre-millennial world, or the pre like second coming world, to the post second coming world, the millennium. And we do have a little bit to suggest that they may have talked about it, because Bradley R. Wilcox, in two of his talks, he talked about the fact that uh, he brought up the question, as though this is something that they've actually discussed in their meetings. Do we have enough full tithe payers? Do we have enough like Melchizedek priesthood holders, Relief Society presidents, bishops, and missionaries, and all this stuff? So I'm sure that they've thought about that and that they're thinking about it. There's probably things in the works to prepare for that day, because that's going to be a really big transition, especially thinking about the large influx that Bradley R. Wilcox talked about. I don't know if this was an actual number that they were discussing, but he said in one of the talks, is the church going to be ready to have 2 billion people join the church in one day? Can you imagine preparing for that? Preparing for 2 billion people to join the church? That's a lot of planning. So let's stay sharp. Let's have our head on a swivel. Pay attention to church news, newsroom, all the church's social media accounts, and let's see what happens going forward. But I tend to think that it's going to be like what Elder Maxwell said, that as we get closer to the second coming, there, the scriptures suggest that there's going to be a compression of events. And I think he was mostly talking about like disasters and judgments coming upon the earth. But that probably also applies to the church preparing itself for the second coming. By way of, disasters and signs of the times, that's all I've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. Is it does feel already, during this transition between President Nelson and President Oaks, it already feels like there's been a compression of events and signs. Just let's see, 9 days ago, I saw the aurora from the I saw the aurora from the temple lot. I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime, and I saw it with the naked eye. I did a live stream. I also did a video for my other channel, Explore Church Sites. That's not, that's not common. I know that. I'm not saying that it's unprecedented, but it is uncommon. And for it to happen so close to this transition between President Nelson and President Oaks, I don't think that's coincidence. We saw the events that took place after President Nelson's birthday and after the day that he passed away. Shocking things, signs of political instability and division. We saw Hurricane Melissa, the strongest hurricane to ever make landfall in the Atlantic. Um, I know there's been other things. The Israel Hamas war potentially came to a close. At least they reached a ceasefire. I know that there's been some things going on there. Who knows if it'll hold? Uh, it's only been I'm recording this. By the way, sorry, I don't know when I'm going to publish this. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow on the 21st. We'll see. But at the time that I'm recording this, President Oaks has only been president of the church for only a little over a month. He officially became president of the church on October 15th. But from September until now, there have been a stunning number of events. We do have some other things going on as well. Apparently, there's protesting and stuff going on in Mexico. It seems like that's becoming a bigger story with each day that goes by. And then we have the USS Gerald R. Ford, the aircraft carrier that's in the Caribbean right now. It came from the Europe area, the Mediterranean, all the way to the Caribbean. There's a lot of troops, like a substantial amount, and this is a rumor of war. I guess we don't know exactly what's going to happen. I myself tend to think that it's not going to be like a full blown war, but it could be. I mean, these days, nothing surprises me anymore. Going back to the Aurora, I saw the Aurora twice last year in South Central Kansas. And then I saw it this year at the Temple lot. Nothing surprises me anymore. I was there at the Kirtland Temple for the 2024 total solar eclipse. The path of totality of which went over the Kirtland Temple a month after the church purchased it and a day after General Conference. Nothing surprises me anymore. But there's a danger with this, because I always point to, I think it's 3rd Nephi chapter 2. I think that's the one, verse 8, where it talks about how the Nephites became less and less astonished at a sign. We've had just incredible signs ever since I started this channel, and before, ever since 2020, really. So we can't become complacent. We can't become numb to these things. We still need to pay attention. We still need to document it. We still need to process it. And it seems like they're just coming quicker and quicker. So, sorry, kind of all over the place with this video, but that's what you get with videos like this. It's not as organized as my other ones where I have my tabs, but I think that's okay. It doesn't always have to be streamlined and perfect. I like things to be human and organic and natural. I hope that you feel like my channel is a natural channel, that I connect with you in a genuine way, with heart and soul, and with my testimony. I hope you know that I really believe in doing this channel, and I really believe in the church and in all the things that we're seeing. I know that the Lord's hand is in all of it. So we should pay it respect. If the Lord is doing things, then let's pay attention and make sure that we're doing what we need to do. Let's make sure that we're magnifying our callings at church. Let's make sure that we're going to church in the first place, that we're not less active or inactive. Now is a really bad time to be doing that, by the way. If you're watching this, but you're not going to church, please consider going to church next week. Get back on the covenant path. We've made a covenant to partake of the sacrament every week, and also keep the commandments, and also to go to the temple. And part of going to the temple is there's all these things that we need to be doing to be worthy of a temple recommend, attending our priesthood meetings and keeping the Sabbath day holy. So without making a big thing of it, please make sure that you're where you need to be. Make the changes that need to happen. Talk to the bishop if that's what you need to do. It's better just to take care of it. Just rip it off like a Band-Aid, but have the Lord involved in it, of course, and do it. Do it at your own pace and make sure you're ready, but do it. Okay. I should probably wrap it up now. But this was nice. I'm glad the lighting is better. It's still probably not perfect, but it's good enough. I think this is fine. Okay. Well, that's going to be it for this one. I'll talk to you guys later.